Coming up on this episode, Greenland are rejected by CONCACAF, Georgia's bodyguards prepare for their European debut, and Santi Cazorla takes Real Oviedo back to La Liga. Hello, and welcome to The Sweeper, the World Football podcast made in association with FIFA Plus. I'm Lee Wingate.
And I'm Paul Watson.
And for part one of this episode, we're joined by Nick Miller of The Athletic and The New York Times. Nick, welcome to The Sweeper. I think the last time I saw you, we were at the foot of an Austrian mountain with a huge police presence, a Mozart-themed tifo, lots of pyro, and two very hateful sets of football fans.
Yeah, I mean that makes it sound. I mean, it makes it sound we were on some kind of great mission to an uncharted part of the world or something like that. But yes, it was Red Bull Salzburg against Austria Salzburg, who, you know, the great kind of first meeting of these two teams. Of course, Austria Salzburg, the team that. Well, I don't know how do you describe it? When Red Bull first entered football, we say, and they took over Austria Salzburg, and then the team that was formed from the kind of rubble of that, the Phoenix team, I suppose, Austria Salzburg, who started from the kind of the bottom of Austrian football. And rose up and are now just got promoted again to the second tier, didn't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one division away from a potential league meeting the season after next, which would be quite something.
It was one of those. It was one of the sort of, in terms of a contest at least, it was one of the least competitive football matches I've ever been to. Mm-hmm. But the occasion was just sensational, as you say. The kind of this absurdly beautiful setting at the bottom of a mountain, and the fans were, just extraordinary. So yeah, it was. I think that the people involved at Austria Salzburg are some of the best people I've ever written about in football. And I was, exchanging messages with people last week when they got promoted. It's absolutely delightful.
I think a victory on the pitch clearly for Red Bull Salzburg, and the moral victory went to Austria Salzburg that day. But you, Nick, were the perfect person for this episode because you've written a great piece called Geography, Politics and Admin, the long road to becoming an international football team, about the struggles of Greenland and other unrecognised nations as they work towards competitive international football. Before we dive into all of that, Paul, can you give us a quick recap of Greenland's situation? So why they can't join UEFA, who they turn to instead, and what are the newest developments?
Yeah, so Greenland can't join UEFA because the statutes were changed that meant that only countries recognised by the United Nations as independent states can join UEFA. And this happened in about 2001. Leaving Greenland with no route to UEFA. So the natural thing that they did was they thought, well, let's look at CONCACAF, because CONCACAF does not have this rule. There are a lot of non-independent nations in there. And so that was where they had this big hope that CONCACAF was going to be the door to FIFA acceptance.
And was it?
It was not, no. This month they got the application together. There was a extraordinary general meeting in CONCACAF, and they were unanimously rejected. All 41 members said no to Greenland's bid to join CONCACAF, which has left them reeling, really, and left them with very few places to go.
The letter from the CONCACAF General Secretary, Philippe Moggio, was incredibly vague, and so we can only speculate what the reasons are for this membership rejection. I suppose there's the travel angle. You've got very long and expensive journeys to Greenland. Although, having said that, they did open a new international airport in the capital, Nuuk, last November, and there are direct 4-hour flights from New Jersey. You've got the geography angle. Perhaps the CONCACAF members feel that it's not geographically part of the Americas enough. But then again, they have permitted French Guiana, Guyana and Suriname in South America to join. The weather also, the winter lasting from September to May. It's an ice-covered island, and it's only possible to play on artificial turf. I can imagine the Caribbean nations aren't overly up for that. And of course, more recently, the political angle. Donald Trump has been threatening to take Greenland in this bid for Arctic supremacy. Nick, which of those reasons, or indeed any others, do you think are the likeliest ones for this rejection?
It's just so difficult to tell, isn't it? I mean, none of them really. I mean, I suppose the only practical one is probably the weather, because the rest of them don't really stack up, given that I mean, it is tricky because as you know, the UEFA example has established, these things aren't necessarily consistent. It's not like, well, you let these guys in, so you got to let these guys in. It doesn't. It hasn't really kind of worked like that. But a lot of those other the reasons that you've outlined, they're not really. They are also factors for many other teams, as you've said. So the weather, that could be a thing, I suppose, and it is, you know, it could be quite limiting. But it is a little bit hard to look past the kind of political stuff, really. I'm not a geopolitics expert by any means, but it doesn't really feel like the USA buying Greenland is actually going to happen, or a realistic thing. It just feels like this kind of buffoon bloviating about what he wants to do and how he wants to buy the world. But the kind of fear of that, and people making these kind of decisions based on what they think might be advantageous for them or might annoy the wrong person or something like that, feels like it could be the most realistic thing. Because I mean, kind of ultimately, they might have come to the decision of, you know, who's going to care really, apart from this kind of very small group of people, this small state. Is it going to cause us more trouble? Potentially going to cause us more trouble than it's worth in the future. And from that standpoint, then they might have come to the decision as, well, we don't really need these guys in CONCACAF, so we're not going to let them in, and furthermore, we're not really going to explain why either.
I think there was a problem, and I saw this in the build-up. I sense there was a problem with building alliances, because as we all know, this is a game of politics. It's how many people can you whip in your favour? Can you build the bridges? And I always worried for Greenland that I wasn't sure they had a lot of direct connections with CONCACAF members. And the thing that was counting against them was it's very hard for them to just go and do a tour. You know, it's very hard for them to just go around all the Caribbean nations and garner support in that kind of pressing the flesh way. But even linguistically, this was a problem. Greenland's communication is very much like in Danish and Greenlandic. There is obviously English spoken, but it's by no means a first language. And when you look at the CONCACAF members, I just had this fear that going into this, they had not really done the politicking that they maybe needed to do. And as you say, the fact the vote was unanimous, I think, is interesting, that all 41 rejected it, that there weren't any naysayers. That suggests possibly a more coordinated movement. But I do just think maybe they didn't have enough friendly faces in the room. That's
a really good point, because it kind of, I don't know, we'll go on to some other examples this later, and Kosovo being one of them. That was kind of the reason, not the reason they got in, but what it was kind of one of the reasons that they eventually got into UEFA, because they've been trying pretty much since the collapse of Yugoslavia in the early 90s, but very little change between the early 2000s and 2016, when they eventually were admitted. Very little kind of tangible change anyway. The status of their country didn't really change. What did change is, as you say, kind of politicking and various them speaking to the right people and getting the more kind of countries around Europe to not even just kind of recognise them as necessarily as independent, but just sort of recognise that fewer objections were kind of put up eventually. So nothing of any kind of real import changed. It was just this the kind of political climate really that changed.
What's been the reaction from Greenland, Paul, and what's next for them? If there's no UEFA and no CONCACAF, what's next?
Well, yeah, the reaction was, as you might expect, shock, really, and I think that's a measure of just how hard they've worked at this. Like this looked like it came relatively quickly, this application. It was actually the work of 4 years, more or less, at least 4 years of getting to this point to submit this application and thinking, they had a chance. They've been doing a lot of hard work on the field. We've covered, the fact the team have been playing friendlies, they've been holding training camps. So I think there was a real build-up of thinking, yeah, this is our moment. And that at worst, what would come back would be a kind of qualified rejection, a sort of no, but if you do X, yes, or a sort of not a unanimous rejection at least. And so I think that really shocked. Literally the message I had from the coach and Morten Rutja, who's been a large part of this, was just, we're in shock. We don't know what to do at the moment, but we're going to take some time and review. And the president, Kenneth Kleist, said the same. He said this is a huge setback, and both him and Rutja are on record saying it's not a victory for football democracy because it makes football inaccessible. And we don't disagree with that. We're very much in the Greenland camp. We are the sympathisers. But as to where it leaves Greenland, Nick might be better informed than I am. But I believe they can't appeal the decision. But I don't think there's anything to stop them reapplying in future. But obviously something significant will have had to have changed for them to believe that would have any impact.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how I understand it. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe they do just need to be a little. I don't know. Naive is such a horrible word, but as you kind of hinted there, there did seem to be a little bit of naivety that I don't know. Maybe they didn't kind of play the game enough. Maybe they didn't. That maybe the case that they made was, well, we should be allowed in, and these are the reasons why. And maybe if there is a next time, then what they should do next time is say, well, this is how it's going to benefit you, and kind of maybe try and make that case to the CONCACAF members. So yeah, as you say, there's no direct recourse to appeal for this specific decision, but they might be able to kind of reapply in the future. Maybe when as we suggested earlier, if there is this kind of geopolitical dimension to it about the USA, maybe in a few years, then that won't be a factor anymore, and their case will be looked on a little bit more favourably.
Yeah, but that's going to be hard, because you look at the people who are involved now, and a lot of the people who are running this or helping push this forward, they're giving a lot of their time and energy more or less voluntarily, and you worry that momentum they've generated could easily dissipate. And it's pretty demoralising now that they aren't even able to play games, against certainly against UEFA teams. That's not even allowed. So they are very genuinely left out. They would be in the island games, but they didn't get a place because it's so competitive. It's a lottery. So they didn't get that nod this year. So sometimes there is literally nothing on their schedule, and that must be very hard for them, I think.
Yeah, it's like nothing to look forward to, nothing to play towards, except I think, didn't they have a couple of friendlies with Danish teams, like club teams recently? Silkeborg, I think they had a double header with them, because as you said, they can't play UEFA Nations, so they have to play their club teams. So it does seem like they are left in pretty dire straits at the moment. Nick, as the expert that's done the research on this, how do you become an international football team? What criteria need to be met? What do you need to do?
Interesting, isn't it? Because you would. I talk about naivety earlier on. I came into writing this piece with a sort of naive thought that somewhere there would be like a list written down of the criteria that you kind of need to become a member of FIFA or one of the confederations. Turns out, no, there isn't. It's a bit kind of. It's not quite vibes based, but it's not that far off, because I mean, I kind of saw the some of the criteria that you have to fulfil to join Oceania, for example, and it was you have to be a country, and then it was like, well, okay, what does that mean? And it's like, well, okay, yeah, don't know really. It's just if it feels like you're a country, then probably you're in. But then the rest of it was all kind of very, and I think you've spoken about this on the podcast before, Paul. It's all very kind of, you have to have a bank account, and you have to have, your national federation has to have a bank account, and you have to have people in certain positions, and you have to have a kind of business plan. And as I wrote in the piece, it sometimes feels a little bit like it looks a little bit like you're applying for a small business loan rather than to join like CONCACAF or FIFA or whatever it is. So yeah, UEFA says you must be a UN recognised country. OFC a little bit more kind of vague than that. But each individual confederation has, or there are lists of criteria there, but they kind of vary wildly. So what you have to do is kind of brace yourself for quite a lot of admin, I think, over the time. It's not quite as simple as, if I bought an island and renamed it like Niconesia or something like that, then I don't think I'd get in. But if you are a slightly more established state, you don't have to necessarily be an independent kind of UN recognised state for everywhere in the world. But that's your starting point, and from there it's all about kind of infrastructure and, as you said, these kind of some of these quite boring admin related parts,
which are always the parts no one wants to do, right?
Exactly,
and they're always the hardest parts in those parts of the world where they're not currently in confederations. But it was interesting, I spoke to someone recently because I thought exactly the same as you, Nick. When I was in Micronesia, I just assumed there'd be an application process, and there'd be, when you apply for anything, there are criteria, there are boxes to tick, and if you can tick them, and you go down a chart. I was like, it'll be like that. And actually, to be fair to OFC, they have now released this kind of form of criteria. What do you need? And that's actually quite revelatory, really. It's quite new for them to be so transparent, and I kind of do respect that. But when I spoke to someone who is in a FIFA member state and said, how is it that Micronesia struggled for so long? Why did we never get anywhere? And he said, it's fundamentally just a misunderstanding of what this process is. It's not an application in the traditional sense. It's a political campaign. See it as the moment you start to think you want to apply, see it as a vote, that you're trying to win a vote. Just look at who the people you'll need in that room fighting for you, and go after them one at a time. Pick them off. Have you got an ally in the Solomon Islands? Have you got an ally in, whichever confederation you're going for? And that would actually really change my mindset. It's like, I said, look, if you have the allies in the room, you'll be in. It really isn't about these rules. It's about who you know. And that made a lot of sense to me suddenly. And that's why I wonder if Greenland maybe just didn't quite manage that, really, with their efforts.
I think there's also an element with Greenland as well that they're very unfortunate with the timing, right? Because if you look at the likes of the Faroe Islands and Gibraltar, Faroe Islands, same status as Greenland, part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but they just applied before the rule change. And Gibraltar applied before the rule change, then didn't get that application rejected. Then the rule changed to say that you had to be a UN recognised state. But Gibraltar took UEFA to the Court of Arbitration for Sport because they'd applied before that rule change came into force. So if someone in Greenland 20 years ago had just submitted an application, not even filled it out properly, but submitted it, they might have a recourse to take them to court now. But as it is, they've missed the boat.
Yeah, very much. And it's interesting seeing people's responses. So I think I did a tweet in which I very much made my allegiances clear and said, look, Greenland deserves to be part of CONCACAF. There was quite a wide response that said, okay, but this is UEFA's problem, effectively. They should be in UEFA. And I get that. There's obviously a much more complicated question about Greenlandic identity and exactly where it belongs, because there is obviously a very strong link to Denmark, but there's also a sense to which they're very much other from Denmark. So I kind of get there's a wider discussion here.
I saw, Nick, that in your piece, one thing that stood out to me about FIFA membership, the statutes has criteria ranging from specifying information about accommodation in your country, and I just had this brilliant vision of someone in Kiribati counting the number of hotel rooms, but also things like submitting the application in quintuplicate, which is a fancy word for 5 copies. Is it as simple to say that if someone submits an application with only 4 copies, they could legitimately be rejected?
Depends what kind of what kind of picky people are in the office at that time, I suppose. It is, as you say, it's this kind of strange process whereby you kind of, I don't know, we're following these rules, and if we follow these rules, are we going to get in, or does it matter? Or are we going to do this, or are we going to get rejected if we don't, go on Expedia or something and count the number of hotel rooms in our country? What's going to happen? Yeah, I mean, it would be. I'm not going to say funny, but if they did get an application did get rejected because it was only submitted 4 times, then I don't know. Very strange.
Let's look at some of the case studies that you talked about in the piece. We've got Kosovo, Kiribati, and Nauru that you talked about in quite a lot of detail. I think all of them have got really fascinating angles. Is there one that you want to talk about most or to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think you've talked about Nauru quite a bit on the podcast, so there's probably not. I can't add a huge amount to that. The Kosovo story was. I know it's kind of. They are an established country now, an established UEFA country now. They have been so for nearly a decade. But the stories behind that I've found the most fascinating, and found the most kind of I don't know, human, I suppose. Like the guy that I spoke to was talking about how it's not just a kind of we want to be in the club kind of thing. It's not just we want to play international football because it's fun, which is part of it, but it's also a kind of like a positive expression of national identity, which, you know, in the former Yugoslav states has been a problem before, the expression of national identity. So you know, this and the obviously it was a huge underdog story, as all of these are, but in particular this, when they had the kind of the strength of some of the people that were advocating against them, and just some of the little stories like the guy who basically snuck into a hotel where the Swiss and Albanian teams were staying, obviously with quite a lot of Kosovar rooted players, and sort of got them just to sort of sign a petition and saying, please let these guys in, which, you know, that in itself wasn't the deciding factor in them getting into UEFA, but it's those kind of things that, you know, you were talking about earlier on about it being a political campaign. You kind of work the room, and in this case, the room was a hotel where Granit Xhaka and Xherdan Shaqiri were, so they could kind of lend their help to this cause. So yeah, that was the kind of one that really kind of stuck out and hit home for me.
It's quite interesting as well with Kosovo that, having been allowed in, there are now 6 banned fixtures, which we actually talked about just on our last podcast in UEFA. I think there might be a 7th now, by the way, because I think Ukraine and Belarus in club competitions, they can't be drawn against each other. But up until now, there have been 6 banned clashes that are not allowed to take place for geopolitical reasons, your likes of Spain, Gibraltar, Armenia, Azerbaijan. But 3 of those 6 involve Kosovo. They are Kosovo against Serbia, Kosovo against Bosnia, and Kosovo against Russia. So even though they've been allowed in, there is still such tension surrounding their inclusion into UEFA and FIFA that they can't play a whole handful of UEFA's member states still.
Yeah, I mean that it is a problem, but it's the kind of thing that you like to think that people will kind of find a way around, not find a way around it, but kind of overlook this for the kind of greater benefit that it gives, rather than, you know, this is politically awkward for some countries, but on the other hand, you are giving this group of people a kind of sense of identity and, you know, and national pride. So, you know, just suck it up and make the draw less, deal with the draw, deal with the admin, you know.
I remember a few years ago, I was in both Belgrade and Pristina not long after the other, and I asked people that I was relatively comfortable with in both countries about their stance on the matter, and they are just diametrically opposed, as you can expect. But I was talking to 2 very calm people in very separate conversations who instantly became a lot more animated and had a lot more to say when I asked them about that. I think I was just in a brave mood that day. Kiribati is an interesting one. This is a bid to bring football to a banana republic. This is probably the only country where we can say they're a banana republic without insulting them, because they are a republic and they do have a city called Banana. Paul, what are the challenges with bringing football to Kiribati?
I think it might be one of the hardest places on earth, Lee, because you are looking at 23 inhabited atolls that they currently are trying to develop football on. I think it's 23. And the funding that they get from OFC as an associate member is really, really tiny. It's about 30,000, I think it's New Zealand dollars. But also, a lot of that funding has to be in specific things, like it has to be for equipment, for example, so they can't use it for salaries. And actually, you think about that. You're trying to develop football in this incredibly difficult geographical situation. You have almost zero money, so it is really a volunteer-led thing. And as a result, they barely ever get to play any matches because the money just isn't there, and there doesn't seem to be any assistance for them in doing that. So they haven't played the national team hasn't played a football match since 2011. When you actually try and figure that, can you imagine that happening in any other part of the world? That you can be an associate member and have gone through all that to get yourself actually into a confederation, and you're not given any assistance to make it to play any events at all.
And Nick, there's actually a pretty brilliant reason about why they didn't play a game more recently that they should have played in, right?
Yes, they were instead participating in the kind of island games, I guess you'd call it, called, I believe, Tauranga. Is that what you say? So they essentially had the choice between the 2023 Pacific Games and playing that. So they decided to play in Tauranga instead. Which...
to be fair, Taurunga's it's a big deal in Kiribati, and I think
sure.
it's like an Olympics for Kiribati. Effectively, it's an amazing thing, and that's where they get football teams from literally all these islands coming across, and it's a miraculous thing. But the funniest thing for me was the withdrawal was something like 3 or 4 weeks before the Pacific Games, but Tauranga would have been known about for literally years before that. So the pullout was. It's something Kiribati has become slightly known for, pulling out of competitions late, and this was very, very late. And it was a real shame to see him pull out that one because it would have been great. Tuvalu did go and did a really good job. The other associate members did a really good job at that Pacific Games in showing, how competitive they can be, whereas Kiribati just literally didn't show up.
Again, it just comes back to the kind of playing the game and the political thing. Just if you want in, kiss some babies, go to the right parties, go to the right international games or whatever, but if the alternative is this kind of great historic big deal of a games, then do what you like, I suppose.
I guess they're not necessarily helping themselves on that front then, are they? But what a fascinating topic this is, looking at the roads to becoming an international football team. Nick, thanks so much for joining us on The Sweeper, and I hope to see you in another picturesque football stadium in a forgotten corner of Europe again soon. Listeners, if you want to read that piece from Nick, you can check it out on The Athletic or on the New York Times. We'll put a link to the piece in the episode description. But for now, we'll take a quick break and turn our attentions back to club football in part 2. Welcome back to part 2 of The Sweeper, and it's time to turn our attentions to club football. We've got stories from Spain and Moldova coming up later, but first up is the draw for the qualifying rounds of the European club competitions. It's always a happy time of year for us at Sweeper HQ, isn't it, Paul? Why do we love the qualifying rounds so much?
This for us is like the Christmas Eve, isn't it, when this draw's coming up, because we focus on these clubs all year round, and suddenly everyone else is saying, who are they? Who are all these teams? And for us, these are the big names and the big ties. So yeah, when that draw comes out, it's always a very exciting time of year, and you're always looking for fixtures that we might want to cover, maybe even fixtures we might want to go to.
Yeah, I think because European football is now so tilted towards the elite, I mean, less so since the introduction of the Conference League, but mostly in the latter stages of competitions, you do see the same countries and clubs represented. It's really great to see countries and clubs who wouldn't usually get the opportunity to play European football to have that chance to do so on the continental stage. We're going to talk about some of the debutants in a bit, but in preparation for this episode, I asked you to pick out one standout club and one standout fixture from the qualifying round draw. Paul, what have you gone for the standout participant?
This one won't surprise anyone who's been listening to us for a while, because it's Santa Clara. So CD Santa Clara from the Azores, who have Portugal's representative in the Conference League. And just simply geographically, this is a very, very interesting thing that you have this club in the middle of the ocean who are now going to be hosting European football.
Yeah, and who have they been drawn against in I think it's the second qualifying round of the Conference League, isn't it? Who have they got?
They've got NK Varaždin of Croatia, who will go to the island on July the 31st, and who don't sound particularly keen on doing it. Their coach said, we can't say we're thrilled with the draw, primarily because of the demanding trip that awaits us.
What an ungrateful. I mean, we'd love to do that. Does he not know how much we'd love to take his position?
What's not to like? Come on, guys. Yeah, it was a very funny response because people usually don't they're not as honest as that usually, are they? But I can see it's a hell of a journey when you look at it. It's one of the longer trips. It's not. I think you were floating one that was potentially the longest imaginable. Was that was the team from Kazakhstan? Potentially could have drawn Santa Clara, I think, at some point, and that would be the longest possible trip. But it's a really significant one, this.
Yeah, what would break the European record for an away day, which is currently held, I think, by Sporting of Portugal and Astana of Kazakhstan, would be if Santa Clara were to face later in the qualifying rounds either Ordubasi Shymkent of Kazakhstan or Astana. They would be 7,600 and 7,200 kilometers, respectively.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that would be an absolute mammoth trip, wouldn't it? This one's definitely quite a daunting looking trip, but it's really exciting to see them in there, and I would love to go. Sadly, the dates and the distance don't quite work, but we will one day get to see them. Hopefully, they can keep this run going, and we'll get to see someone play there.
Yeah, I thought about going to one of the legs in Croatia because it's in the north of Croatia. It's not actually that far from Vienna, but I think you'd be missing out on why we'd be going to see Santa Clara, which would be to go to the Azores, right? So I think I'll save that for a later date.
Yeah, I think it's something magical about going to such a unlikely destination. You know, there's this like windswept little outpost of Portugal, and seeing a team arrive there, and obviously it's gonna hopefully, you know, give them a bit of an advantage. I know we're neutral, but hopefully it will give Santa Clara a bit of a boost to be playing at home.
Yes, I agree. What about the standout fixture?
Well, for me, I can't see far past the big Republic of Ireland versus Northern Ireland clash, which is Shelbourne and Linfield in the Champions League preliminary round. That's a massive tie, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, we have had a couple of Republic of Ireland versus Northern Ireland club clashes in recent years. In fact, just last season in the Conference League, we had Shamrock Rovers versus Larne, but they are usually fairly feisty affairs, which can be marred by violence, crowd trouble, and even sectarian behaviour.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a tie that I imagine UEFA wanted to see. This one seems a little bit less likely to be a problem, I think. I think there's a sense that if it's Linfield and Shamrock Rovers, for example, there's a real animosity there. This one, I think they're less worried about that side of things. But what was really interesting was going into it, a lot of the talk has been about Damien Duff, obviously the sort of famous and quite charismatic but divisive leader of Shelbourne, and David Healy in Linfield, his sort of Northern Irish equivalent in certain ways. You know, two players who had very big careers, two sort of talismanic figures leading their clubs. But actually, Damien Duff has literally just resigned. Like as I was preparing the notes for this, he has very suddenly resigned from his post at Shelbourne, which is a really big blow for them, especially coming so soon before this big tie.
Yeah, because he just steered Shelbourne to a first league title since, was it 2006 last season? So it is a big loss. I saw that Shelbourne put in their statement, we regretfully announce that Damien Duff has decided to leave. So I'm sure it is a big blow to them. Yeah, and
it seems like it's come very much out of the blue. From what I was reading, he was due in to take a training session, and instead of that, effectively came in and said, I've taken you all as far as we can go. I'm off and left. So it seems like maybe if there have been things behind the scenes wrangling on for a little while, but it seems like it's been a pretty abrupt departure for someone who has, become a huge part of that club. So it's going to be really interesting now to see how this plays, with this tie coming up. Shelbourne probably had the advantage in that they are, in their campaign. They're playing league matches. Linfield are still in pre-season. But I wonder how much of that goes out the window once you lose your manager, unexpectedly like this.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. We have to mention, I think, the debutants, the clubs that are making their first ever appearance in a European club competition, that is excluding the Intertoto Cup. We've got 6 debutants this season. We have Crystal Palace. We're still not completely sure, I think, if they can participate because of the owner of Lyon having a 43% share in the club. I think he's just managed to sell that to a buyer in the United States, but Crystal Palace, I think, not totally confirmed yet. We also have Samsunspor of Turkey, Novi Pazar of Serbia, Araz-Naxçıvan of Azerbaijan, Daugavpils from Latvia, and Spaeri from Georgia. I thought that we would perhaps zone in on 3 of those clubs: Samsunspor, Araz-Naxçıvan, and Spaeri. Which of those do you want to talk about first, Paul?
Well, the one that really caught my imagination was Araz-Naxçıvan, because I knew so little about them. And I saw that they'd drawn Aris Thessaloniki from Greece in the second qualifying round of the Conference League. But I knew almost zero. So I started to look into them. And of course, they're from an exclave, which is very much sweeper territory, right? So the Naxçıvan exclave, part of Azerbaijan, but it's closer to Iran, Turkey, and Armenia than mainland Azerbaijan. So it's a really curious geographical anomaly in many ways.
Yeah, and I saw, because I was thinking, what I always think about when we get places like whether it's Ceuta or Kaliningrad, I think about how that affects footballers for their regular matches. Like, how do they get there? How do they travel? And so I had a look at how they travel between this Azeri exclave to the Azeri mainland, which is separated by Armenia, which, as people who follow European geopolitics will know, they are not friendly countries. Their clubs aren't even allowed to play in international competitions, nor are their national teams. Apparently, after the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, a ceasefire was signed, according to which Azerbaijan gained a road access to Naxçıvan through Armenia, which is secured by Russian peacekeepers. So I guess what that means is every time this club has an away game, they have to travel along this road, which is essentially held secure by peacekeepers. That's got to be quite not the most relaxing journey to an away game.
No, and it's a fascinating place in other ways as well. It's got an almost autonomous government of its own. So it's run by the Naxçıvan Autonomous Republic, which sort of feels like it's its own entity. And so you're in this very isolated place. As you say, you can't even reach Azerbaijan mainland very easily. But yeah, it feels like a very otherworldly kind of place to be in. And beyond that, the club themselves have had quite a weird history in that they were involved in a match-fixing incident about a decade ago. Then they withdrew from the league entirely, I think in 2014. So they've had this crazy kind of tempestuous relationship with football in Azerbaijan itself. So for this club to now be in a European campaign is quite fascinating. And you do wonder, if they were to go a little further, how hard some of these teams are going to find the trip just simply logistically to get there.
I do wonder if in a UEFA competition they might play their home game in Baku. I can't imagine Aris Thessaloniki will want to fly to Baku and then get this road which is patrolled by Russian peacekeepers.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure their stadium is up to code in any case. It's not very big, I don't think, their home stadium. So you're right, it could well be played in Baku, in which case you do lose a bit of that, and you probably lose a lot of what would have been quite a home advantage from just simply how disoriented the away team would have been.
Spaeri, Paul, they are Georgia's cup winners, but what makes them prime sweeper for this discussion?
Well, are they not the team of the effectively the security services, like the I don't know what the equivalent is in the UK, but like, are they kind of like not the SAS, but they're sort of like the Secret Service team, aren't they?
I think they are the Georgian Special State Protection Service, which protects high-ranking officials or foreign dignitaries. And so essentially they are a team of bodyguards. Now, the fact that, when you go into Wikipedia and you look at a football club and you see like their nickname, the fact that there's not a nickname, the Bodyguards, on their Wikipedia page, I find quite quite distressing, actually, because what a perfect nickname that would be.
Yeah, and if they're not walking out to the theme from The Bodyguard, then what are they doing? Like,
Yeah.
what are we playing at here? But I imagine they don't have a huge amount of fans then, this club. I mean, it doesn't sound like a cuddly sort of story to me.
Yeah, I'm really not sure in that regard. But what I was actually getting at when I asked you what makes them prime sweeper is the division they're currently playing in, Paul.
They're a second-tier team. Yes, second-tier team in Europe, which we always love as well. Yeah, that's pretty sweeper too. So yeah, then we're gonna have to keep a real eye on them. And are they? Do you know, Lee? They're based in Tbilisi? Then they're a capital club?
I think they are. Off the top of my head, I think they are based in Tbilisi. They're currently top of the second tier in Georgia, which is a summer league country, at the midway point of the season. So they might, by the end of the year, be in the top tier, I would have thought. But yeah, they're playing against Austria Vienna. Now, being based in Vienna, I got very excited when I heard that Spaeri might be in town, so I looked up the dates of their fixtures, and the leg in Vienna is on the 24th of July, at which point I am on holiday in Istanbul and Cappadocia, and I don't think my girlfriend would particularly appreciate me rearranging that holiday. So I'm going to miss the visit of Spaeri.
Oh, that's a shame. Yeah, it's hard to get the importance of that across, I think, to anyone outside of us too. I thought for a second you were going to say you were going on holiday to Georgia, which would be typical, wouldn't it? That you sort of in the wrong one for each game. But we'll have to hope they get through and make a little run, and then we might consider a football trip to Georgia, because I'd love to go there.
Yeah, me too. Samsunspor, then, our final club that we're going to profile in this segment as a European debutant. They are the ultimate yo-yo club. No club has been promoted to or relegated from the Super League more times than Samsunspor, 7 times each. They gained promotion in 2023, but finished only 3 points above the drop zone, and then came out of absolutely nowhere last season to finish third behind the giants of Galatasaray and Fenerbahce. So I think this has taken many football lovers in Turkey by surprise. But I'd actually first come into contact with Samsunspor a couple of seasons ago when a video went viral of their team bus. Did you see it, Paul?
No, I didn't see this.
It was a lovely video of a little boy who lived on the road that the team bus drove down to all of their games. And he used to wait on his lawn and wave to the team bus every time it went past. And after a while, Samsunspor must have clocked he waits there for them every time. And so they stopped. They stopped the whole bus. You can see how excited he is. Perhaps editor Ralph can stick the video up of this on the screen for those who are watching the video version of this podcast. But he like has his hand over his mouth. He's like saying to his parents, "Look, they stopped." And then the coach, the players, they get off. They give him a high five. They give him a cuddle. They pose for a selfie, and then they get back on the bus and they go on their way. But it was a super heartwarming moment.
That is really lovely. Oh, now that's a reason to support the club. Another one that I only learnt because of our brilliant club profiles that we get from Football Rankings. Our patrons get one of these each week about a different club in Europe. I learnt that their ultras are called the Smurfs. Did you know that, Lee?
Yeah,
Did you do that previously? That's an amazing fact. I don't know quite why. It doesn't explain why, because you'd have thought a red team wouldn't necessarily have Smurfs as an obvious name, but
yeah,
I love it.
I feel like I might have read that this name came from a rival and then they embraced it.
Ah, okay.
But
yeah.
not totally sure about that.
But all in all, yeah, it's adding up to a team that I can get behind anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. They won't be in the qualifying rounds until the end of summer because I think they're going straight into the Europa League playoff. But we will, of course, keep an eye on Samsunspor when their turn comes. I think we will, of course, be checking back into the European qualifying rounds as the matches start to take place. But for now, let's move on to our next story, which is another heartwarming one. It is Santi Cazorla and Real Oviedo. Paul.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes people say you couldn't script this, and it's usually something really kind of basic that's happened in football, and they say, oh, you couldn't script it. This actually is one that felt like a film script, really, with Santi Cazorla coming back to Real Oviedo, his childhood club, and then playing a key role in firing them back to La Liga for the first time since 2001, 24-year wait. But even more than that, a club that were teetering on the brink of complete collapse in 2012. They were on the edge of folding. And I think you might remember this, Lee, because I remember it clearly. There was a time where a lot of people were just buying effectively shares in Oviedo to try and keep the club alive, just people all around the world. One of them was Cazorla, who donated a lot of money, I think, to his childhood club. And then for it to come all the way through to now, at the age of 40, for him to score these crucial goals in this promotion playoff against Mirandes, and for them to be re-promoted, it's a beautiful story, isn't it, really?
You can tell that this is a career decision that is driven purely by emotion for him as well, because he requested, upon rejoining Oviedo in 2023, to play for free, which is not allowed according to league rules. So he instructed his agent to get him the lowest possible wage, which is apparently a €91,000 per year, which is not bad by most people's standards. Yeah,
the Swedes will take that.
Yeah, but by a footballer's standard is obviously a little bit lower in one of Europe's. Well, I suppose it is one of Europe's main footballing countries. Yet it's the second division, isn't it?
Still something quite funny about that, isn't it? I'll play for free. You can't do that. All right, €91,000 it is, then. As if there's nothing between those two.
But the point being that he didn't clearly care about money. I think he also transferred all of his image rights to the club as well. And then, as you say, played a key role in this promotion playoff. They lost the first leg to Mirandes 1-0. Then Cazorla scored in the return fixture, which Oviedo won 2-1 in 90 minutes. Then, by virtue of the fact they finished higher in the league, they would have been promoted if it had stayed at 2-2 on aggregate till the end of extra time. But as it was, they managed to score a late goal, win 3-1 on the night, and get promoted. So they will be back in La Liga. Whether Cazorla is there with them, that we don't know yet. I think he hasn't made a decision. But he never played for the club at senior level as a teenager. And so you wonder if the pull of representing Real Oviedo in La Liga will be too great for him to turn down.
Oh, it's funny, isn't it? In a way, what a time to go out, on such a high. You could almost see how much it was him specifically that everyone was celebrating. Well, at that final whistle, it'd be very hard to walk away at this point. You want to be there for La Liga, but he is 40, so maybe he'll take a sort of back seat. I don't know, or maybe he'll just play a season where he's on and off the bench. I don't know. But interestingly, this game had already sort of come up on the sweeper map because of their opposition, Mirandes, who themselves were a pretty amazing story. And there was a lovely video actually doing the rounds of Mirandes' team returning home, having been defeated very late at night, and being again mobbed by, well, not celebrating, but mobbed by fans who wanted to celebrate their efforts because of what an incredible season they had put together. This is a club with the lowest wage bill in the whole of the Spanish second tier. In fact, they had to cancel their pre-season friendly just before the season because they didn't have enough players. So Mirandes, in a way, if they had been promoted, would also have been a complete fairy tale, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's why we decided to park this story, wasn't it? Because we basically said whoever wins, there is a great angle there. It's either Santi Cazorla or this tiny town in Spain getting into La Liga. As it is, Mirandes will still be in La Segunda next season, along with a really interesting selection of clubs, right? From a quirky geographical perspective, La Liga 2 really has it all next season.
Yeah, it really does, because now we've got FC Andorra, who have come up in the playoffs themselves from the third tier up to Segunda. And so you've got FC Andorra on one hand, and then you've got Ceuta, who we've spoken about fairly extensively, being on the mainland of Africa, also in that league. So there's going to be some geographically fascinating ties being played, aren't there? And in fact, the distance also, there's going to be a really huge one between Andorra, who have got to go to the Canary Islands, haven't they, for one of their games? Yeah,
because Las Palmas got relegated. Actually, the fixture that I was thinking would be most interesting from sort of a logistical and travel point of view is Las Palmas to Ceuta, because Ceuta doesn't have an airport, it only has a helipad, but most clubs get there by ferry. So I imagine Las Palmas will just have to fly up to the south of Spain and then get a ferry back down to get to Ceuta.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Or is it Las Palmas to Gibraltar to ferry over to Syria? I have no idea. My geography in that region is terrible, but I know there are going to be some teams having real logistical nightmares next year. But the sweeper loves that kind of thing. But I've got to say, we love the quirkiness of it all, and there's going to be some really fun ties in that league and some amazing stadiums as well. Have you seen FC Andorra Stadium? It's absolutely beautiful, the backdrop to it.
Yeah, there was a viral picture, wasn't there, on Twitter at the weekend, and it does look absolutely stunning. But you're right, we will definitely be checking back into La Segunda next season. It's got an exclave club, an island club, and a foreign club, so it is ticking absolutely all of the boxes. Now, Paul, while the 2024-25 season has just drawn to a close in Spain, the 2025-26 Moldovan Superliga campaign is already underway. Football is relentless, isn't it? And this overlap proves that it never stops. And quite often, in this context, people talk about the athletes and how tiring it must be. But nobody ever thinks of the podcasters, do they? We're absolutely exhausted. With this overlap proves that football just never, ever stops.
Yeah, you're quite right.
Who thinks of the podcast?
Who is thinking about us, Lee? We're the heroes no one talks about, right? Yeah. I really felt that with Moldova, with that league kicking off. I had to check twice because I just thought, no, it can't be restarting. You know, it's technically sort of an autumn league. You know, it's known as an autumn league traditionally. So really weird to see that league kicking off with champions Milsam or Hay getting off to a first win, and they have changed the system, Lee, and I don't know if it's because they listened to the sweeper, but we were bemoaning the Moldovan league system, and sure enough, they've altered it.
They have, and I think this might go hand in hand with the kickoff date, because what they've done is they've stopped this bizarre situation where the points get reset to 0 after the regular season, which is how you ended up last season with a team that hadn't suffered a single defeat finishing second and a team that had lost 5 games winning the league. So they have clearly decided to bin that system, which has only been in place for 3 years. And now they've changed it so that there will be a regular season which is slightly longer, so each team will play 3 games against each other team in the 8-team league, and that, I think, is why the season has started earlier, because they need to find room for 7 more games in the regular season. And then when the regular season is over, we've then got the points being halved, I think, is their new decision, isn't it? The points are being halved, and then that means that at least the regular season counts for something before you go on into the championship round.
Yeah, and is this the same as Austria League? Because I remember you talking about points being halved. Because don't you sometimes get people with quite snooty comments who obviously have never watched Austrian football saying, what, they're champions and they've only got this number of points or something like that, you know, top of the table, but and it's because Austria halves them, right, halfway through.
Yeah, the way it works here is they halve them, and if you've got an odd number, you get rounded down. But if you've been rounded down in the league table, you have an asterisk next to your name. And if 2 clubs then finish the season level on points, but one has an asterisk and one doesn't, the one with an asterisk will finish above the one without. It's definitely a system which divides opinion in Austria, especially because what it does mean is that the weighting of the final stages of the season is worth twice as much as the first part of the season. But at least in Moldova's case, that's progress, because if it's worth twice as much as the regular season, that's better than the regular season being worth nothing, right?
Yeah, which was, when you think about it, a hilariously strange system when you consider that the title race was always likely to be a 2-horse, if not possibly a 3-horse race. So to say, let's just delete that whole thing and then put you into another group, just tremendous waste of everybody's time, really. So yeah, well done to Moldova for moving slightly towards a more logical system. And yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense to me. But bizarre for them to be kicking a season off within the month of June. Yeah, it just makes you feel very tired sometimes.
That being said, if you look at the 3-year window when Moldova had this system in place, you've got 3 different champions. You've got Sheriff, you've got Petrocub-Hinchest, and you've got Milsam Orhei. And arguably that is better for a country than what had happened beforehand, which I believe was Sheriff winning all but 2 titles this century. So now the system definitely makes more sense logically, but at the same time I wonder if we will just go back to an era of pure Sheriff dominance.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And then that makes you wonder in turn whether Sheriff have any kind of sway over whether this decision, was this decision made partly because of pressures from Sheriff? Are there people involved in the decision-making process who perhaps thought, the stronger side needs to win? Or is it to do with who goes into Europe? Maybe they wanted to make sure they give their strongest account of themselves in Europe, and that probably is Sheriff. So... Yeah, you're right. It probably does kill some of the romance of the thing. Although, as we said, there's limited amount of romance in Moldovan football at the best of times.
Yeah, it's certainly not the cuddliest league, is it? I think we will end the pod there for today. It's quite a long one already. But we do have some information about our summer schedule, our pre-season schedule, Paul. We've got another bonus pod coming out as per usual on the 2nd of July. Then we've got our next main pod on the 9th of July. And after that, for the first time in 2.5 years, we are taking a break. The podcasters need a break. So that means there will be no main pod on Wednesday, the 23rd of July. We will return one episode later on Wednesday, the 6th of August. But, Paul, we will still be releasing Patreon episodes during that time. So anyone that wants to keep going with the Sweeper throughout the summer, stay in touch with the qualifying rounds, and just generally get their weekly dose of football, join us on Patreon.
Yes, please do. It's patreon.com/sweeperpod. And as well as continuing your podcast fix, we also have loads of other great features. We have a weekly newsletter. There's a Discord community where people can chat about all elements of football. We have club profiles from our friends at Football Rankings, as we've mentioned. Just basically loads more content going out on Patreon. That's not going to stop over the summer.
Yeah, I think we have 4 or 5 different things per week going out now. So, it is busy on the Patreon, and it is the main way that we are funded. So please, if you are enjoying the Sweeper, do support us there. As Paul said, that's patreon.com/sweeperpod. But we'll bid you farewell now, and we will return for another main pod on Wednesday, the 9th of July.